It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. We're in our third segment this fine, beautiful morning. And as promised, we're going to talk about an issue which I think will be instructive for us. The Netherlands has recently come out with a national policy that they're going to address. You know, for decades now, the Netherlands has been riding with the principle of multiculturalism, and it's caused an amazing level of havoc in their nation. 6% of the population in the Netherlands is now Muslim. And it's created such a problem in their society because the Muslims have refused to integrate, and they've refused to learn the language, and they demand all kinds of exceptional individualized benefits and things that, you know, I mean, there's no integration, and yet they want to be treated specially, but they won't, you know, participate and become affiliated with the country that they now live in, right? So the Dutch government, and this is the government now, this is not some idea that somebody's talking about. The Dutch government has made a statement that they are abandoning the policy and the long-standing model of multiculturalism that has encouraged Muslim immigrants to create a parallel society within the Netherlands. You know why? Because Sharia law is tearing their country apart. There's a new immigration bill, which their Dutch Interior Minister has presented to Parliament. And here's what it reads. Quote, "The government shares the social dissatisfaction over the multicultural society model and plans to shift priority to the values of the Dutch people." Let's read that again. The government shares the social dissatisfaction over the multicultural society model and plans to shift priority to the values of the Dutch people. In other words, their society has had it with the concept of a parallel Muslim, non-integrated society that lives within their boundaries, but not within their rules, not within their mores, not within their societal boundaries. That they want their own special courts through the Sharia court, that they want their own special privileges, that they want religious privileges, that they demand tolerance when in the minority, but once they've reached the majority, all tolerance for anything other than Islam ceases. And ladies and gentlemen, that's a fact. You may be entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your facts. We do know that the only concept of multiculturalism that Islamics have, and Islam has as an organization or as a religion, is that they want multiculturalism in any place they're a minority. But once they are in the majority, try to find multiculturalism in their country. They'll burn your churches to the ground and they'll terminate and kill your citizens who are not Muslim. I mean, that's just the reality of it, guys. We can try to, you know, rationalize the arguments in different ways, but the simple truth is they're intolerant of anything when they're in a majority, and they demand tolerance from everyone when they're in the minority. And the Netherlands has had it. In the new integration system, the values of the Dutch society play a central role. This is their quote now. With this change, the government steps away from the model of a multicultural society. This has been one of the major issues of the downfall of the European Union and Europe in general. They have promoted this multicultural aspect of their societies for so long that it is actually destroying the fabric of their society as a collective group, and it's actually injuring their ability to function as a government and to function as a society. So the letter goes on and says, the more obligatory integration is justified because the government also demands let me rephrase that. Let me start that again. A more obligatory integration is justified because the government also demands that from its own citizens. In other words, if you're not going to integrate, you're not welcome because we demand that of our citizens. So if you come here, you are going to integrate or you're not welcome. Now, some people say, well, that's cruel. That's not fair. If somebody wants to come here and bring their culture with them, they can. I'm not disagreeing with that. I am going to tell you, however, that you, as a new immigrant to any country, and I don't care whether it's the United States or whether it's the Netherlands or whether it's South Africa or whether it's Zimbabwe or whether it's Iceland, when you move to that country because you feel that country, the grass is greener on that side of the fence than it is on whatever country you're leaving, you have an obligation to live within the rules and the framework that country has. Truthfully, it's in your own best interest anyway if you were to be intellectually honest about it. In other words, if that country is that great, if it's that perfect a society that you want and desire to move there, why would you move there with the intent to disrupt that which drew you there in the first place? I really don't understand that. I mean, I get it that you want to keep your own culture. You maybe want to keep your own language. You want to worship in the religion that you had back in your home country. That's fine. But you can't change the law to say, we're going to move here and live here. We're going to take advantage of your resources, but we don't have to adhere or follow any of your laws. That's inconsistent and unconscionable. It's unethical, it's immoral, and quite frankly, you have a whole lot of brass even suggesting that that's an appropriate solution. If you're going to move there, the thing that drew you there is their society, their freedom, their law, or whatever it is that gave that society, whether, and again, it doesn't matter where it is, that's what drew you there. Unless your motives are something far more nefarious. Now, if you went there as a Manchurian candidacy, in other words, let's clarify what I mean by that. If you emigrated to a country, and many immigrants are grouping together to migrate into a country with the intent of usurping that country and undermining its power and its authority and its rule of law and its society, then again, you've got nothing further. You've got no place to complain. You've been caught at your game. And so I think it's time that we stop the political correctness, run amok scenario that seems to, for whatever reason, pervade every aspect of our society. I mean, this concept of, everybody has to be tolerant of everybody else, and irrespective of where they come from or what they... You know what? If you come to any country, you have an obligation to live within the framework that nation has developed under and incorporates. If you're not willing to do that, then don't go. And if you're going there with a more nefarious approach of, you're going to take it over from the inside and fundamentally change it, then just because you're caught at it doesn't mean that you're entitled to some special dispensation. Right? And this applies, by the way, to, and then again, when we talk about our southern border, I've heard Mexicans come over here and say, we stole it from Mexico and all that kind of thing. I'm not going to give that any credence. I mean, I'm not saying that there haven't been travesties that have done in the past, and the same thing applies to slavery. But you're not going to stand here and hold me responsible today for something that happened 200 or 100 or 150 or any other period of years ago. That's it. And you're not going to hold the government accountable and expect us to pay you reparations or give you a chunk of Texas or Southern California or any other darn thing. That ain't happening. The borders are established. They're created. That's it. Live within the boundaries of what they are, or go back to wherever it was you came from. I know that may sound harsh to some people, but you have to recognize something. We have our own culture here too, and we're not obligated to abandon it because you want yours in our home. I mean, look, think of it this way. You wouldn't go over to a family member's home, and they keep their house in a certain way. They do their things in a certain way in their home. And if you were to go over there and visit for an extended period of time, or say, I'm moving in, and you choose to disrupt their household in such a severe and compromising fashion that their household no longer operates in the way in which it did before, they have a right to say to you, you either live the proper way in our home, the way in which we've developed and designed our home as a guest, albeit a permanent one, or leave. Remember the old adage when your father or your mother said to you, this is my house, and while you live under this roof, you'll follow my rules. Well, guess what? The same applies to nation states. It's no different. They're going on in this article to say it is necessary for this obligatory integration because otherwise the society gradually grows apart and eventually no one feels at home anymore in the Netherlands. In other words, our home has been destroyed. It's no longer a home. Now we're a bunch of strangers cobbled together in a commune. The new integration policy will place more demands on immigrants coming in. For example, immigrants will be required to learn the Dutch language, and the government will take a tougher approach to immigration to immigrants, who ignore Dutch values or disobey Dutch law. Hey, guys, that doesn't take a whole lot of rocket scientists to figure. If you violate the law of the host nation that you've moved to, you're not entitled to some kind of special dispensation. I'm sorry, and I'm so tired of hearing that you think you are. If you're an immigrant watching this today and you're offended by that, too bad. When you come to another country, you obey the laws of that country. Those laws have created the framework which made it look so green to you from your old side of the fence. That's it. The government will also stop offering special subsidies for Muslim immigrants because, quote, it is not the government's job to integrate immigrants. Now, this idea of giving special subsidies to immigrants is absurd. When you immigrate or migrate to a new host nation and you say, I want to become a permanent resident here, you have an obligation to be self-sufficient. Not to walk in there and say, I'm here just to act like a sponge upon your national resources. It's not the government's job, and therefore the taxpayer's job, to support you. I understand the fact that people come here and they're usually destitute when they get here because the situation at home was so bad. And I'm empathic to that. But at the same point in time, that kind of support breeds dependence. And when we look at past immigration cultural integrations during the earlier days of the United States, we find that those immigrants who came here penniless and, obtained modest help from their community, but not from the government itself, were the ones who became the strongest pillars of their community. Those were the ones who were most successful. You know why? Because there's an old phrase my mom taught me when I was a kid. Here's what it is. Necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. And what that means is, if you are hungry, you will work to accomplish and feed yourself. You will make sure that you are clothed, that you are out of the rain, that you have warm clothing to wear. So, necessity, again, is the mother of invention. If everything is handed to you, you become dependent and never independent. Go ahead, caller. Welcome to the show. Caller, are you there? Hello? Caller, are you there? Last chance. Caller, are you there? Okay. So, the problem here is that where we stand today is we've got this scenario where people immigrate into countries, and I'm not just talking about the United States here. Again, this example runs across multiple countries, right? And when you move there, you are obligated to improve your own lot. That's why you went there in the first place. But improving your own lot requires that you stand on your own 2 feet and be responsible for your own actions, be responsible for your own self-maintenance, your own self-reliance, your own self-sufficiency. It's one thing to get help from a community of other immigrants and a community in general who live there and say, hey, I'm one of you. I could use some, we're here, we're destitute, we need some food and a place to live for a little while till we get a job and get our act together. Or general community, we're starving here, we just got across the border, we need some help. And the community at large says, sure, we're empathic to your needs and we'll help take care of you for a short period of time and contribute to your rise, okay? That's all acceptable. But when it becomes incumbent on the government to take care of you, you will never achieve any level of self-reliance, nor will you ever achieve any level of independence, because you have, for all intents and purposes, become a slave of that government. You are enslaved by your own dependence. So let's move on to this. The government in the Netherlands, the government will introduce new legislation that outlaws forced marriages and will also impose tougher measures against Muslim immigrants who lower their chances of employment by the way they dress. More specifically, the government will impose a ban on face covering and Islamic burqas as of January 1, 2013. That's when this went into effect. Holland has done that whole liberal thing and realized maybe too late that creating a nation of tribes will actually kill the nation itself. The future of Australia, the United States, the UK, and Canada may well be read here in this article. This is the article I'm reading directly to you from. Note, Muslim immigrants leave their countries of birth because of civil and political unrest, created by the very nature of their culture. Countries such as Holland, Canada, UK, and Australia, and the United States have an established way of life that actually works. So why would you embrace the unworkable? If Muslims do not wish to accept another culture, the answer is simple. Stay where you are or go back to where you were. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I think is an applause. I applaud that position, and I'll tell you why. What we have and where we've seen this going over the course of, and we have plenty of examples of this. All we got to do is go look back at Europe to see what's happened to them in their multiculturalist agenda, to know what ours will end up looking like. Don't forget, we don't have an example domestically at home to see what our future will look like. But we can look back at countries who have recently embraced multiculturalism in the past couple of decades and now are sorry they did, because they've seen the results of how that destroys their own culture, their own infrastructure, their own nation, their own law, their rule of law, their government itself, the fabric of their society. And so I am a strong proponent of, saying that when you are, and look, This is proven over and over and over again. The UK is going through the same death throes of multiculturalism. They're now recognizing, and by the way, for the record, there are places in London, whole neighborhoods, whole districts, where you cannot go if you are not a Muslim, especially if you are a law enforcement or you are a female and non-Muslim. I'm telling you, they are instituting their own Sharia courts in enclaves in the midst of London. They're doing. Did you know that Marseille in France, that entire city is majority run by Muslims now? France is in the death throes of this multiculturalism thing. It has destroyed their country. It has created and wreaked havoc with their political, their civil, their ethical, their language, their every aspect of their culture and their society, every single ounce of it. And it was all because they capitulated to these demands for tolerance and multiculturalism. And it's not, folks, just relegated only to Islamics. I'm not trying to pick on Islamics here. I'm using this as the example because, that seems to be the culture that demands the most tolerance. I'm not saying that, people coming here from South America, from Mexico specifically, don't demand special, dispensation. They do. In fact, I talked yesterday about the fact that there was an article where they are actually in Mexico, or the Mexican nationals are protesting outside U.S. hospitals saying we are entitled to free organ transplants. You're entitled to what? You've got to be flipping kidding me. You're not entitled to anything. Nobody owes anybody anything. It's one thing if a country and individuals decide to be, gracious and assistive of other people, other cultures coming in and attempt to help them. But the minute that you tell me that I owe you something and you're demanding it, that's theft by coercion and force. And let me tell you something. We're not going to tolerate that very well here. We already get enough of that from our own government, our own terrorists in Washington, D.C. We're sure as hell not going to take it from a bunch of foreigners, too. And that's the simple truth. I think America needs to call it out like it is. We need to call a spade a spade. We need to point the elephant in standing on our feet and point it out. We need to address the fact that we can no longer hide from this multicultural nonsense. We don't have an obligation to adhere to it. We don't have an obligation to institute it. And I, for one, will resist it every step of the way. And you should too. You should too. Thanks for being with us. We're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to take up our last topic, which is unemployment has now struck 8.9%, and Obamacare is tearing apart our financial system and our employment system. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a moment. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And then you can find this and every other program that we do on streaming video. You can catch it at YouTube, where you can watch and listen. You can find that by going to youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll be back in just a moment.